Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stewart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look.
All right, well, welcome to tonight's show, and we have Larry Taylor on with us. Hi, Larry. How are you doing?
Hello, Stewart. Thanks for having me.
Well, no problem at all. We talked a little bit offline about you've been doing some research on Cyrus, and that's kind of interesting because that deals with ancient Babylon. What did you find?
Well, what's kind of interesting about that, you know, on the last show that you and I did, where you had Augusto and me on, Augusto mentioned the term Cyrus, and then I looked at it a little bit, read some scriptures, and then the next thing I knew, right after that show over the weekend, Tom Horn came out with a mention of was Donald Trump another Cyrus, you know, and with a question mark, you know. Yeah, yeah. But one of the things that's interesting, I did a study, and I'll tell people where I've been studying. It's the New Unger's Bible Dictionary, if they just want to know. But let me run this concept. It's kind of interesting. Matter of fact, what's interesting, when we talked about this or posted a little bit, a couple of emails came in, and people said, well, Trump's no good because he's not a solid Christian. And you know all the you know, he's not a great patriot, and he's not this and that and the other. And you know what? Now let me tell you about Cyrus. Now, for people that don't know Cyrus, which you can find him in mentioned, you know, in Isaiah, Ezra, Second Chronicles, Daniel. It mentions him again about his edict in Second Chronicles and Ezra 1:2-3. But basically. Some of this lines up with scriptures as parallels, along with, I found, some inscriptions on the famous cylinder of Cyrus found in the 19th century. And it says it's in a remarkable agreement with the royal edict as set forth in the Bible. And so what's interesting is we're talking about Cyrus the Great, or Cyrus the Persian king. Now, for people that begin to doubt that maybe I've just completely lost my mind, Cyrus the Persian king, I want to clear this up right off the top, was someone that was only available. I mean, he was a wild card. And what's interesting, Stuart, I used the term, you know, we've got other wild cards, Putin, Netanyahu, you know, I mentioned Donald Trump as a wild card on the last show we did. And now I'm saying that Cyrus the Persian king was a wild card, and this appears to be the Creator uses whom he chooses, and they're not perfect vessels, and some of them are extremely imperfect, but they do what he wants them to do regardless, and so it seems to work out. It did with Cyrus. Now, what's interesting about this, Cyrus was a king over the Persian Empire, and I want to really be clear about this. He was a worshiper of Marduk, you know, the god Marduk, and so I'm not claiming he was a Jew. I'm not claiming he was Hebrew. I'm not claiming he was a Christian. I'm not claiming he even served the Lord. I'm just saying, okay, that he was someone that the Lord chose to use. Now, this is what's interesting, and I want you to think about this right now. We have come to clearly see, I don't think there's anybody out there that watches the news very closely that doesn't know that the rich men, and that's one of your terms, Stuart, rich men of the earth, involving what they call the establishment, you know, the establishment, especially in America, but also around the world, that they don't literally have, well, not only God's people under the thumb and have tightened the noose around God's people for years, stealthily, in other words, very quietly and silently and using trickery and deception. They put a noose around God's people's necks, and they pulled it so tight now they're choking them out.
Yes.
And basically they've thrown everything of the Lord out of the nation, and they're saying, you cannot serve your God. You can't. Not in public, not in courthouses, not in schools. I mean, they just began naming all these places you can't serve him. And so this is what we saw a little bit when you go back to the time of Cyrus. Babylon conquered, the Jews. They had conquered God's people. And see, Babylon, if you read this closely, Babylon had a strategic plan. When they conquered somebody, any peoples, the Babylonians would literally uproot them from their land and take them away out of their land. And so what are we seeing today? Basically, the same scenario to some degree, because Babylon, at the time of Cyrus, when he was king, Babylon, which was a strong fortress type, the nation there, had basically the Hebrew people in captivity and absolutely just like slaves to some degree, serving them and pulled out of the land completely. And so what we see here is that all of a sudden, what's odd too, I read clearly in here where it says that Cyrus was a king that wanted to do the right thing. In other words, he was a humane king. That's the key. I didn't say, and I want people to realize I'm not saying Christian, I'm saying a humane king. He just wanted to do right. He wasn't particularly trying to form a religion because he worshiped Marduk. I mean, and so what's interesting is he raised an army and declared that he would go to Babylon and conquer Babylon. And this is and I'm looking at this now, and it looks like Trump probably is going to be so double-crossed. As a matter of fact, they're even threatening his families now, but that he's going to be so double-crossed that he cannot do anything for anybody. There's plans laid there and traps and all this kind of thing in the next few months. But what's so interesting, and I'm not telling people that, he's next. What I'm saying is there seems to be a parallel. Interestingly, Trump seems to want to, he's not trying to be what everybody wants him to be, especially a politician. He wants to just do the right thing, so to speak. And maybe it's what's right in his eyes. But then again, the people of God right now are so mashed down and have been crying out. I'm not talking about the church, Stewart, in America. I'm not talking about the church at all. They're happy. They've got a carnival every weekend. But what I'm talking about, the real people of God, the intercessors, the prayer warriors, people that are beaten down and sick and tired and broke and have no money, have no jobs. That's the kind I'm talking about, the real people of God that want to serve him. But they're being denied that service because of the servitude they've been given by the so-called rich men of the earth and the establishment. So here we are. Cyrus raised a mighty army. He marched down to Babylon. And the cylinder says a strange thing, the cylinder inscriptions. When you read it, it says that something odd happened, even though it was, Babylon had a major army and everybody was expecting an incredible conflict and destruction, maybe of Babylon totally. It says, and I don't know, I can't describe what happened. I don't even know the details, but in the cylinder, it describes Babylon being given into the hand of Cyrus, and there was no great battle. He literally marched into the city. The king was given into his hand, and he took it. And then guess what happened? He told the people of God, all those that had been removed from the land, that they were free to go back and serve their God, and he wanted them to build a temple to their God.
Yes.
And so I just find the parallels in time really amazing, Stewart.
Well, we are at that time. There have been more than one Christian, I think, but one sticks out. He had asked repeatedly, who was Donald Trump? And the Lord said he was going to use Donald Trump to expose to the people of America everything that was going on. And he has basically been kind of doing that. He pipes off and releases all kinds of stuff. I remember he said he even knows the secret of who did 9/11, 9/11 attacks. And, there's no question. People just cannot believe that our government would turn on its own people, and I think that's where you got the problem. It's beyond their belief structure that their own government would actually betray them. But I was reading an article not very long ago where they had interviewed a bunch of elderly, and they said, we don't even recognize the nation anymore. It's not the country we knew.
That's right.
And just like you said, I mean, they've just come in and surreptitiously, over a long period of time, just infiltrated and then changed everything. So,
Stewart, I was just going to say that I agree totally with what you said, and I could be wrong, and I'm not telling anybody to believe anything. I'm just saying this backs up, in my eyes, my theory that Donald Trump is another wild card in the deck. And I've said before, Benjamin Netanyahu was a wild card. Vladimir Putin is a wild card, and Donald Trump is one. And we've had another ones now. Where all this goes, I don't know, but I do know it seems like the people in the nation and the establishment certainly don't want Christian anyway. You've got or you've had for the last couple or three elections, Mike Huckabee, and he is a Christian.
Yes.
And they don't want him at all. They don't even give him. They don't even pay him mind. Even the voters don't pay him mind. So, see, if people say we need a Christian president, well, you're not going to see that because nobody wants him.
Well, that's it. And you had people like Ron Paul, who was a doctor, and I've always thought that was kind of funny, that the Lord would bring along a doctor because it says in Jeremiah, we would have healed Babylon, America, but she would not be healed. So here comes a doctor and Ron Paul, and they wanted nothing to do with him. The American people soundly rejected him. Now we have Carson, who is out of the race. He's a neurosurgeon. He's a brain doctor. So maybe that's a message that there's something wrong with the brains of America because they've rejected him as well. And and the other thing that is a little disturbing here, you made mention of the fact, I hadn't really thought about it, but you're absolutely right, that when we went into Iraq and we got into that war, we came under the Prince of Persia.
Oh, my, you're right.
Isn't that interesting?
That is, wow. That's a big wow. We had talked about that some time ago during the Iraq war and all of that, and then some of the follow-up of that war, and we have seen nothing but the movement of the Persian. And then who does Obama for almost 8 years now pamper and kiss and hug and be concerned about? But the Iranians.
Yes. Well, see, this is Obama said some time ago that when push came to shove, he was going to side with Islam. And he told the Islamic world, the Muslim world, you're going to find out that I am your friend. And so what we have here, actually, probably, is a caliphate going on right here in America. I mean, we have now almost no-go zones. We have Islamic terrorist camps. I think there's like 36 or 37 of them right here in America. The FBI doing, kind of monitoring them, but nothing is done about it. However, if you have these so-called Christian radicals, they just about throw them in prison. And so what we've seen here is a big shift. And this is a shift that Jeremiah the prophet more or less indicated in Isaiah 2, that we reject the God who gave us all those blessings in Deuteronomy 28. We've turned our back on him. And there's no turning back now The rich men of the earth have no choice. They have to continue with their plan, even though it's totally suicidal, and they can't win, but they think they can. And they think evidently they can outsmart this God, maybe through technology or something. But it is kind of interesting that we do have we're under the Prince of Persia. No, we are Babylon. No.
That's right. You're right.
So this is really kind of an interesting thing with the research you've done on Cyrus, because Cyrus really was, as you said, he wanted to do the right thing. He allowed the Jewish people to rebuild their temple, and so it's going to be interesting. What now? You mentioned also that Donald Trump has now had threats on his family. You want to elaborate on that?
Well, there was some breaking news on Fox 3 or 4 times already today that a package of white powder was been sent to the residence of his son, the son that helps him in the campaign. And yes. They've had apparently death threats coming in, and they say the Secret Service is investigating. Of course, well, okay, but
like they helped John Kennedy during his little Dallas trip.
That worked out well. And
I have the.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to mention that also they're not stopping at all. Matter of fact, some of the rhetoric from Obama lately is supporting MoveOn.org and Black Lives Matter, et cetera, et cetera. They're all coming to his rallies, to Donald Trump's rallies, and causing havoc. And they are apparently, from what I can understand, going to continue and even increase the trouble. So, we're certainly looking at problems, but Donald Trump is really, if there ever was, it reminds me so much of Netanyahu. When I talked about Netanyahu and I prayed for him and all of this, I would get emails from people that said, well, don't you know, he's tied into some of the world leaders, the groups, the New World Order, the Trilateral, blah, 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 blah. And I said, no, he's a wild card. That's going to make a difference. And my Lord, has it made a difference? And but Donald Trump's the same way. People can call and they can say that well, don't you know he's probably a Mason and he's all these things and he's a rich man himself and blah 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 blah. Well, people's got to realize that there are wild cards out there, and they're very difficult to corral. Matter of fact, that's what's interesting. I saw a headline today, just came out. I was looking. Oh, here it is. Drudge report put it up. Said New World Order or World Order at risk? ? Democrats, Trump, a dangerous and unprecedented threat. In other words, they're making him almost like a national security threat there. Obama increases coming against Trump. Now, that's headlines from Drudge Report. So what you said is exactly correct.
They've got to stop him. The only way they can stop him now, let's say he does get the Republican nod, even though they hate it, he may very easily be able to sweep up the necessary votes to get in, and they can't do a brokered convention like Augusto was talking about. But let's say he does come through, and he is the so-called candidate of the Republican Party. The leaders of the Republican Party have already come out and said they're not going to support him. So what you have here is they're running out of options to stop him. Now, one way they could stop him. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I'm just going to mention that I was listening to Lou Dobbs tonight just before the show started, and he was talking about a threat from the GOP that, if Donald Trump did win, basically, they were going to literally hold a convention to change the rules. In other words, they would literally go in, change the rules, and take it away from him. And so
that would probably cause. Yeah, go ahead.
Trouble. I was just going to say that probably would cause the trouble that Donald Trump's been telling them about.
Well, it would. Maybe this is what causes Dmitry Duduman's sort of. You know, we're already well deep into this ruler against ruler of Jeremiah, and the rumors in the land. We've debated what is the rumor that goes out throughout the land in one year and then in another, and then it's ruler against ruler. And for a while, we all thought that was the 2000 Y2K situation, which did go out for 2 years. Now we've got Jade Helm, which would bring violence in the land if they intend to ignite that. But these guys, I hate to say it, but I think they're idiots. I think these rich men are the most deceived, like you have said. They're the most deceived of all. They really do think that they can bring this about, not realizing they're committing suicide. They're going to lose, and they're going to lose big time. They ought to read their Bibles, really. I mean, how do they explain that 2,500 years ago we have a report about Cyrus the Persian? Here we're going to find kind of a duplicate going on. And, they've got to pull out all the stops. So they got two choices. An emergency situation, Obama never leaves office, or two, they assassinate him. They get rid of him. Now, you've had some, I know there have been death threats. I've seen the articles all over that he's, what was it? I can't think of his name right offhand. He's big on conservative radio.
Levin?
No, he was going to knife. He was going to, if he stood beside Trump, he was going to knife him. And he got in trouble for saying that. Glenn Beck, yeah. See, now, why would somebody of that stature make a remark like that? I mean, there's got to be absolute hatred for this wild card. He's not part of the establishment. Wasn't it Newt Gingrich that said he's not one of us?
Well, Stewart, when you think about it, if you was the Jewish people in captivity in Babylon, and you heard that Cyrus, the king of Persia, and he was the great Cyrus, as they called him, the great king, that he had a massive army and was marching down on Babylon, would you probably not, and, you would be thinking, oh, my, he may just surround this city and destroy everybody and kill all of us. That's a little bit of God's people here in captivity. He may just destroy and kill all of us. Well, don't you think at that time probably the Jews were thinking, God, I think I hate that Cyrus, that King Cyrus. I hope he don't come. They were probably saying, I hope he don't come or don't show up, when he was literally their deliverer.
Yeah. Well, there's so much disinformation, misinformation, lies, distortions. The only book you've got is the Bible to tell you what's really going on, and of course everybody hates that book as well. So, the American people are really totally adrift. They're not going to solve it by bringing in Trump, re-electing Obama, let's say, or Hillary Clinton. I'm kind of curious about all this. I don't know if you remember it, but there was a vision somebody had about Hillary Clinton being sworn in the underground city in Denver because some emergency had taken place.
No, I don't remember that one.
You don't remember that one? Well, I've always thought, a woman rides the beast. So I have no idea. She's in a lot of trouble. I was seeing a headline where she's getting into a fight with the NSA now.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, Stewart, I listened to some of the generals talking today, and some of the intel people, and they were one of them was I think what's his name, Newt Gingrich maybe, and the ambassador, And they were all talking, and they were saying that, and also I believe Judge Napolitano was speaking about that if this is presented, in other words, if what she has done and the FBI is investigating, if it is presented to the DOJ and nothing is done, that apparently there's going to be a split in Washington, D.C. itself, is what they're saying, and there's going to be just hundreds of resignations within the government, that there's going to be, that this government is going to split completely. And Stewart, I know a lot of the old seers and saints and other people have talked about a second civil war in America, and we may be seeing the beginnings of that, and it'll be brought about by just clearly, like Jeremiah says, the rulers. They're fighting amongst themselves.
Well, you've got governors fighting the feds. You've got the Fed fighting the governors of the states. You've got the feds attempting, actually, total usurpation. And then we have the UN that is usurping the United States. And it's kind of a global ruler against ruler as they try to bring in this whole new world order of theirs, this utopia that they think they're going to have. And I don't know, the UN Agenda 30, if people would just go online and Google Agenda 30/50 and find out what the UN has in store for you and I, it's incredible. But nobody seems to say anything. Nobody cares. I don't know. I've given up trying to figure out if there is a line in the sand anywhere for the American people. I just don't really think there is. I mean, Go ahead.
I was just saying, I was thinking today, we use that term stupid. We came up with that, and you said actually it's biblical. And,
yes.
What it is, though, is the American people have become so on a level of stupid. And so many of them, the masses, it's how civilizations go down. I mean, I can clearly look back to probably Rome, and
yes,
how that right at the last there, there was infighting and fighting and a bad leader and the what they called their Senate. Remember all? And we've seen movies they put together from some of the past times, and my God, the deception and intrigue and backstabbing, real backstabbing, not just pretend. In the Senate and the leadership of Rome, and then all of a sudden, we don't hear about Rome much anymore except for the Pope. And do you know that even the Pope has come out again, another time, slamming Trump? This thing, and this is what's interesting, Stewart, to me, is in this election, the whole world, even, we've got presidents of other nations that are slamming Trump. I've never seen that in an election, ever.
I think
the whole world comes against you. Yeah.
I think they are. I think the elite of this world, the rich men, whom the Bible clearly identifies, Psalm 2, kings and rulers, Revelation 18, the lords of the earth, the big corporations, all of these people are all tied together, and I think they are scared to death that the people are beginning to rise up, and they've got to stop it. They've got to stop Trump. He's kind of the rallying guy. Now, I don't know who he is really, or, there's been a lot of articles out there about, his Masonic connections, but like you were saying, it doesn't really matter. He's not necessarily going to follow orders. Let's put it that way. I do remember an interview, I think it was Larry King, on CNN, and he was interviewing, I think it was Walter Cronkite and Eric Sephirite, and they got into this New World Order, and Eric looked over at and he said, I'm trying to remember exactly how he worded it, but he said something like, if this is the New World Order, who needs it? Well, I don't think a lot of these people realize what this new world order is. And I don't think they realize that when they come to power, all the newspaper editors and writers and magazine people and all those people that aided and abetted this, what do they do normally when they take over? They kill all these people.
Well, they get rid of them because they expect them to do the same thing to them that they did to the other people, you know.
Exactly. If you will betray your own people, and every military guy listening to this right now, if you will betray your own people, I'm just following orders. Yeah, well, guess what's going to happen to you when the power elite comes into full force? You're going to be executed, every one of you, and your families. You're all going to be executed. That's what they do. That's what they've done throughout all of history. They're not going to. Well, I would too. If I was a dictator, I'd kill every one of them. You can't trust them.
That's true.
I mean, really, if they would turn in their own families, how could you trust them? You couldn't.
That's right.
And go ahead.
I was just going to say, let me take you in another direction if you want to go, because I know we're already over halfway through our show. You were talking about the only book that people could believe in or really read and believe was the Bible. Here's something, I don't know if you've seen it yet, a headline on Skywatch TV. It says, we've got out there, the Torah codes. People can believe them or not believe them, but there's really incredible stuff hidden, and I'm talking about hidden stuff now. But
yes,
it's interesting, Stewart, that we are in a time frame that we have computers and technology that can do these kind of things, and none of this was available till we wound up in the time frame of history that we are now to do this with the computer and technology. But they just come out with a brand new one. It says a researcher finds Protestant Reformation secret, and I know you like to use that word esoteric, and the hidden things. It says secrets hidden in England's oldest Bible. It says the Bible is one of 7 survivor Bibles published by Henry VIII's printer Thomas Bethelet in July of 1535. Now, what's interesting, it says a Dr. E.L. Polig says that with careful looking, it has revealed hidden layers in long light exposures of secret writings in that Bible, the one that they found, and now they haven't said what it says, but there's secret writings embedded in that Bible. Now, I know we have to watch out for deceptions, and we know that sometimes there was claims that they were going to come up with, lies that are put out there just to confuse people and cause people to err. But I find that really interesting, Stewart. Yeah, I find that really interesting that they found that.
Wow. That would be interesting if they would release it. It's kind of like the Dead Sea Scrolls, They didn't want to release a lot of that. And I found out later a lot of it deals with UFOs and contact and all of that sort of thing. And I think they are. I think Project Bluebeam, Serge Monats, he got, let's say dispatched because of his Bluebeam project research, but Bluebeam is really coming out into the open if you just watch what's going on all around you. The technology is there now, and I've often wondered if a lot of these UFO sightings that we're seeing now are not satellite projections. Yeah. Rather than real, because that was part of the Bluebeam project, that they were going to be able to produce holographic projections. And you may remember that my daughter was out doing her rabbits one time, this was years ago now, and a big UFO came in over the neighbor's field.
I remember that.
And Cindy went out there and took a look at it, and she said there was something wrong with it. She was in art, and said that the lighting was off. And we came to the conclusion that it was probably a holographic projection, that there actually are fooling around with this stuff, and they're practicing. It's like these sounds that are now being heard all over the world, these strange sounds. I personally think this is all part of Project Bluebeam for the grand arrival, that great deception of the fake Messiah. And when you
possible.
Yeah, and when you were doing your research on Mars, the same time I was doing Project Red Star, you were seeing UFOs on there, like we had pictures of them. Why couldn't they come? You would only need 30 or 40 of them, and then the rest could be holographic projections, and you could have a massive invasion. In fact, that's what von Braun told Carol Rosen, that the whole thing was going to be a fake, that they were going to have a massive invasion, and it was all going to be fake to fool the people into accepting the Antichrist. I don't know. I got a headline here. I wanted your take on it. Riots and fights over food started in Greece. Imagine this on a large scale in the United States when people start starving. Had you heard any more about that? This is only one article that I've heard.
No, but I am hearing that they're really expecting a really hot summer as we begin to go into the convention time. And, and I guess the whole election from now on out is going to have troubles. But, a lot of this troubles could also interrupt. Of course, we've got a million things almost going on right now around the world, even especially the weather that could interrupt travel, which means that our resupplies, by truck is interrupted. And at the same time, I've been hearing rumors that some of the ports, like off New York and the West Coast are having problems too with shipping and so we could have shortages just almost any time, if some of these things. As a matter of fact, people are saying that some stores now are redoing their shelves where it looks the same, but it's not as much on there anymore.
Yeah, I've seen that actually. They move it out to the front, but if you go and look back, there's maybe 2 or 3 cans, and that's all there is. So they are definitely fooling around with it. And if you remember Cliff High in the Bots, he talked about sun disease. And the sun disease was of such a nature that, we were going to have massive heat waves. And, of course, heat just, a lot of people just can't take the heat. And the death, I think, if I read it right, more people die from heat than they do of cold.
Yeah.
Which would stand to reason, because you can only strip down so far, but if it's cold, you can add on more and more blankets and clothing to stay alive. But you're right. I mean, this society of ours relies strictly on next day delivery. And if the trucks were to stop rolling, then within a few days, the whole thing is gone. And that kind of leads to this North Korea. Have you heard any more about these launches that they're planning on doing?
They're still launching off the coast there, and of course, the Obama administration. How can I put this? For the last 7 years, they've been watching. That's it. They've been watching. And, as I said, and I'm repeating myself now, but I feel like it's worth saying one more time, everything Obama has done since the day he walked into office is how you start a big war. It's how you cause a catastrophe. It's whether it's the disease, what are you going to do? You bring them to treat people for Ebola, which you can't even contain hardly. You bring them to America to treat them. See, everything Obama's done, and the American people are so silent. And if they only knew, Stewart, and I know you know because you keep up with it, we are not protected. And even now, we have finally got generals, retired generals, and intelligence people that are coming out and saying, and we had a general the other day, Stewart, say, and he's active duty, he's an Army general, said we're in trouble. We can't field a war. We can't do a war. And right now we're looking at Russia and North Korea and Iran and the
China.
Middle East actually, but we're looking at all of those, and what can we handle? Our whole military has been so degraded, and again, the American people remain silent. I guess they think, a Walmart drone will protect you flying overhead.
Well, I got news for them. I mean, yeah, they've been warning, but look at the number of high officials in the military. I'm talking from generals all the way down probably to captain level, who have just simply been either fired or they're leaving. I remember, I think it was about 10 years ago, a captain, I believe he was in the Army, but I'm not sure, said that he had to leave because he could not have anything to do with what their plans were. So obviously the plans were in the military works for a takeover of the United States, and of course we had Rex 84, Garden Plot, and all that stuff that Reagan in the Reagan years that was doing, and now of course we have Jade Helm, we have the NDAA. Probably 2016, they can arrest anybody anytime they want. But again, I think we got to be awful close. I mean, when you look at the time schedules, like I've discovered in the Omega Code and stuff like that, we got to be right on the edge. Have you heard any more in the Bible codes about the timing or anything like that?
No, Richard Shaw was on Skywatch TV the other day, and he was telling people to keep an eye out. And, of course, he's not setting dates. He just said, he's more or less talking about a season instead of a date particularly.
Yes.
But he was talking about this March the 23rd, and we've heard a lot of that news, We've heard a lot about March the 23rd, and this Purim season that we're coming into now over in Jerusalem, and that, of course, that actually starts, according to their calendar, supposedly about March the 5th and goes, for a few days. But this whole season, it seems like he had talked to Glazerson, and Glazerson had done some Torah code tables that indicated in 2016 that there's something special around March the 23rd, 24th, 25th, in that time frame, and he was just telling people to be watchful. And one of the interesting things is, Stewart, on what you was talking about, the fact that, a lot of this takeover has been built in a long, long time, and I'm sure that Obama is pretty perplexed by now that it hadn't started yet on his watch. He's probably shocked that it hadn't been implemented, but I do believe that the hand of the Lord really has been restraining the implementation of that. And at the same time, we've got Putin, another wild card, and Netanyahu, another one that has caused chaos in the New World Order because they're not going along with the program.
Yeah, I know that Putin said there's no way that they're going to go into a cashless society. He's not going to allow his people to take any kind of a digital mark system or anything else. And wasn't it Stan Deo that did some research? I've always thought that the real New World Order, not the one these guys are trying to set up now, that's upset, has more to do with the arrival. And it's more or less the alien, so-called, we know they're fallen ones, but the so-called aliens, extraterrestrials, are the ones that are going to set up this new golden age, New World Order. But
it's entirely possible, Stewart, that I'm just going to say that's what Stan Deo says, and of course we look back in the Bible talking about the iron and the clay, and they don't mix well. In other words, to me, that means they won't work well together. The genetics even are different. And what's interesting is if you look back at the time of the Nephilim or the giants, or any way you want to put it, they didn't play well with others. Of course, that's a New Age term, I guess, but, it's a popular term these days. But they didn't play well with others, and usually they didn't follow anybody else. They was the so-called gods, if you want to say that. And then again, we have fallen angels, which, they don't serve anybody but themselves either, and they want to be worshipped. And so, all of this could begin to come together really strange. I do know that in Israel, they just had an interesting admission. A man by the name of Meir Dagan, he was the ex-head of Israel's Mossad. He passed away the other day at 71 of cancer. And now they're saying that, that Dagan was the mastermind behind the implementation of the Stuxnet. Now, if you'll remember McAfee, who's, it's a cyber system, and then also Kaspersky, which is a Russian cyber system, have both warned over the last few years that Stuxnet, once it entered the system, you would never leave it. You couldn't get rid of it. You could never really stop it. That a lot of times it'd go dormant and then begin to operate again, and it actually was evolving, which makes you think about AI a little bit. But, well, you remember but at least they finally came out and said that an Israeli was the mastermind behind it. And, of course, anonymously, really weird-like, is the fact that, you remember when I was reporting, and even, some Israelis were reporting UFO landings and some interaction between the Israeli government and the UFO people,
Yes.
I know that sounds bizarre. I know people talk about Area 51, and that's really bizarre, but a lot of this will tie in, I think, down the road. We might not have to have a big of a rival up front as we think. They could be here now working with our different governments or the rich men or the power brokers and this, trying to put this so-called iron clay New World Order together, and we already know the Bible says it won't work out well. It won't work. But, maybe we got to go into some of it. But, Stewart, what I was looking at, I wanted to say this before the show finishes here, is the fact that if God's people really can no longer operate around the world, and we see ISIS right now absolutely a holocaust against Jews and Christians alike, and even others. If there isn't a Cyrus of some kind, if the Lord doesn't take a hand in matters, we're toast.
Oh, yes, absolutely. But I do think he is going to provide protection for his true people. And it might be a removal of the entire church. I know everybody gets all heated up about the so-called rapture, but the Lord knows what he's going to do and when he's going to do it. So I suppose all the arguments we have about it don't really mean a whole lot. He's the one who wrote the Bible, and he knows what his time schedule is. We only know that the Antichrist, or Lucifer, arrives at the appointed time. And so I guess the real question is, are we at that appointed time? Are we very close to it? And it seems from all the evidence, yes, we are very close to it. But the Lord has put his hand up more than once and said, not yet. And there's been a delay. How many times have we been on the edge with Israel, and then it all dies down again? But when Putin said he's withdrawing, I noticed that some of their better, heavily technology-equipped helicopters are now coming in to Syria. So he has firmly established a beachhead to operate out of Syria anytime he wants. So, go ahead.
I was just going to mention that there's been a number of really, really incredible military leaders that have come out recently and said that this so-called chess match between Putin and Obama, Putin won hands down involving Syria. And one of the interesting things is that fact that a lot of them are perplexed by this withdrawal. That came out of nowhere. And all it means to me, and, you know, you and I, Stewart, have watched, we've watched not only Putin, but Russia itself for a long, long time. And, you know, when they move their military equipment around, it's a big ball game. It's a really big chessboard. And Putin seems to be masterful at it, and he has Europe scared to death. And at the same time, a flashpoint coming up, maybe it's something we need to watch. You know, Turkey and Saudi Arabia hate the Kurds. Turkey hates the Kurds with everything they've got. And now the Kurds in Syria have declared a zone, 200-something miles zone, as a federal Kurd region. In other words, they've declared their own, basically, I guess, their own country. But, you know, what's interesting about the Kurds, they protect the people of the book, or the Christians. They protect them. And so what's interesting is Turkey's wanting to attack them. They've got Saudi planes there to do that, but yet Putin's really the only one holding Turkey back right now, and that may not last. But what's interesting is the fact that you know, Putin, they say, has even double-crossed the UN on the Kurdish issue, because the UN and Obama and the rest of the world was never going to let there be a Kurdistan. In other words, a nation of Kurds. And it's begun. Now, what Turkey did, this may be where Russia and Turkey clash, because he has left a lot of his stuff over there, and he's got submarines, even nuclear-capable submarines, under the water, and they're called black holes. And so we still have to watch him. You know, Putin withdrawing military assets, that don't mean anything. You know, he's watching.
Well, he can get in there in a matter of hours. It's like when Ezekiel 38:39 says they come as a storm, as a cloud that covers the land. When the final invasion takes place, I mean, Putin can order his entire military to come down upon the mountains of Israel. All it takes, well, it does say he has hooks in the jaws, which I've always thought probably refers to treaties. We've already proven now that Putin is going to honor his treaties with these nations. He was invited into Syria, but I'm sure he has treaties with Syria as well.
Yeah.
So if he's got these treaties and he's going to keep them, that's probably the hook in the jaw. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Something's going to happen, and he's going to have to come down and try and fix it, and that'll be there. And when that happens, for everybody listening, this is my take only, but when you see the Soviets on the mountains of Israel, we got maybe a week or 2 weeks before we're hit and taken out, according to Ezekiel. And it's not going to be fun. Before we close down, though, Larry, how do people get a hold of you?
Okay, the best way is just go to my blog site. It's http://LarryWTaylor.org, or you can just write into your browser LarryWTaylor.org, and that'll take you to the blog site. I post when I can. Of course, I've been ill lately, and I'm not as strong as I was, and I have some health issues, so I'm going to be a little slower, but I'm still working. And I'll work as long as I can, and that's the best way, though. You can find a mailing address if you want to send me a card or a letter. You can find, in the site there, you can find the email address if you want to write me. Any of those will do. But LarryWTaylor.org will work.
Well, great. We've got a membership site up too for Night Shadows, and all. If they want to get in there, there's a free side, there's a pay side, and it's just loaded with all kinds of information. And they can go to the lightgate.us if they want to take a look-see at all of that. But I really appreciate you coming on, because I know you're not feeling all that well. Let's close out with this headline because this is kind of interesting and showing the times we are in. Scientists closer to cloning T-Rex after discovering the remains of a pregnant dinosaur.
Wow.
Isn't this sort of what is an indication how close we are?
I think we're really. Let me read this one. You got time for me to read one headline?
Oh,
it's
sure.
Called, and this was on the Q Alert a couple of days ago. It says cyborg bionic heart patch combining living tissue and engineered materials unveiled in Israel. Times of Israel reporting that on a stunning technological advance in medicine by the Israeli researchers, that they now can combine the living tissue and engineered materials, and literally, Stewart, not only will an outside operator, of course I wouldn't want this, but an outside operator keep your heart beating in case there's a problem at any time, but they can cause this so-called tissue, this bionic heart, to issue medicines to you and also monitor you 24 hours a day. And that's just, we're getting into some crazy stuff, Stewart.
Well, yeah, and they could do just about anything with something like that. You start talking about the nanobots and chemtrails. I know a lot of people don't believe there are such things, but they're all over the world. And they can put anything in those chemtrails they want. And it makes you wonder exactly what they've got planned here. From the zombie threats that the governments were issuing, and everybody poo-pooed that and said, well, no such thing as zombies. But actually, they say that there is a virus that will mimic zombies. So who knows what they've developed, It's you're right. I mean, it's getting to the point where it's almost unbelievable what's going on out there. But I don't know. I mean, this business of cloning, there was a fellow by the name of Dr. Peter Bader. He claimed they were cloning 25, 30 years ago. So how far advanced are they now? Remember the Cupacabra? Wasn't it the South American nations that claimed that was a creation of the intel agencies, if I remember right?
A Black Project Underground Lab is what they were saying.
Wow. I don't know. Do you expect to wake up one morning and this is already, the invasion is on or World War III is on? That's kind of the way I look at it. That maybe most of the warning signs are already over.
One thing that everybody's warned about that we're not protected against, everybody's concerned with the EMP, and that could happen almost any time with satellites in orbit, like the North Koreans that's going over us every day.
Yeah. And how long would it be before the American people were on their knees if you took out the electrical grid?
Not long. Not long in America. Yeah, almost overnight, probably.
One of these shows, we should maybe do a thing on EMPs and the effects of it, because I don't think the American people are aware of how rapidly this would kill off 80-90% of the American population, because they're simply not. They rely on electricity to the point where without it, they're not going to live very long.
No.
So
you're right.
Anyway, I guess we're coming up on the end. Thank you a lot for coming on. And I personally am going to ask for prayer for Larry, and hope everybody will join a prayer chain here and help Larry out. So anyway, I really appreciate you coming on, because I know you're not feeling well. And keep in touch.
I'll do it, and we'll do another one, Stewart. This has been good, and we're close to things happening.
Yeah, we sure are. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Larry. We'll talk to you in the near future.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Yep, same to you.